think about it, we're a minority here, and our children have never faced any trouble, violence, or difficulties from other children because they're from a different ethnic background. Can the same be said for people, ethnic minorities in other countries in the West? Do they have such an easy ride? I'm not so sure. Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. Now, we have been living in China for a long time now, and as you may or may not know, we're raising two children, Didi and Freddy, here in China. And in this video, we're going to reveal our top 5 reasons why we choose to raise our children here in China as opposed to going back home to England or Holland.
Now, before we reveal the top 5 reasons why we stayed and raised our kids right here in China, I want to remind you to please subscribe to our channel and press that like button. Now let's get into the top 5 reasons. Let's go. And at number 5 is travel.
Now this one's a pretty easy one. Everyone knows that travel broadens the mind, and if you take your children to see different cultures, different countries, expose them to different languages and religions, it's going to be beneficial for them, I think, when they grow up.
And you know, China's location is really convenient because there are so many exotic places very nearby that have very rich cultures, and it's really fun to visit.
Yeah man, I mean, I'd never been to Thailand before, I'd never been to Philippines before when I was living in England. And the idea of going to one of those countries seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime trip, you know, like, oh, maybe you'll go to Thailand one time. You know, this is the regular life, right? You don't do that every year. But when you're living in China, pretty much you get to go to these kind of places once or twice a year because they're so close. And that can only be a good thing for your kids to expose them to all these different cultures, right?
And you know, it's not just about other countries around China. There's also lots and lots of amazing different cultures and different minority groups in China that's really interesting to visit. You go to the north of China, you go to the south of China, it's like a worlds apart, and it's really interesting for the kids to see.
Okay guys, number 4, in no particular order, is safety. Now, everyone wants to bring their children up and to live in a safe society, right? I mean, that's one of the main things we like to have. We like to have safety and security. In China, you have so little crime that you never feel threatened, you never feel at risk or vulnerable. Doesn't matter what time of day it is or where you are, in any city that I've ever been in China, I have never felt threatened. For example, if you're walking around any given Chinese city or town, you do not have to worry about roaming gangs of teenagers who are going to threaten you and maybe commit some act of violence towards you or your family. And is that the case in other countries around the world? Like, for example, I was growing up in England, and even as an adult in England, if I saw a gang of teenagers in the wrong neighborhood or after dark, I would be crossing the road to stay out of their way because maybe something bad's going to happen. And in fact, bad things have happened in the past. In China, you don't need to worry about that. You see a gang of teenagers, they're just going to say, hello, how are you? And you'll wave right back at them. So China is a very safe country, and when you're bringing up children, that's very important for any parent. Now, that's not to say China is perfect. Yeah, sure, Chinese schools will have bullies too. But think about it, we're a minority here, and our children have never faced any trouble, violence, or difficulties from other children because they're from a different ethnic background. Can the same be said for people, ethnic minorities in other countries in the West? Do they have such an easy ride? I'm not so sure. And I'm basing this on my personal experience. I've lived in England 30 years and now I've lived in China 12 years. And I have to say, the level of safety I feel here in terms of my day-to-day life far surpasses what it was in the UK. That's just my opinion, guys. So that's a real good reason for us to stay here in China.
And at number 3 is cultural innocence. Now, what do I mean with this? I mean that kids can be kids for very long. They don't feel the pressure to grow up, and no one gives them the pressure to grow up. And why is this so important to me? Is because when I look back at my childhood, back in the Netherlands in the 80s and 90s, I have such great memories. It was really fantastic growing up in that time. We were climbing trees, we were playing hide and seek, we were roller skating, we were playing with marbles, we had this elastic thing between our hands, all this fun stuff. And I was playing this well into my teens. I actually think that the first time I wore a little bit of mascara was to my prom, and I was 17 years old. Now, I personally really want that for my kids as well. And I feel like right now, China is the place for that. Whenever I go back to Holland in summer times and I look around, I see lots of young teenage girls, and they're wearing quite revealing clothing, like crop tops, you know, those leggings with like the seam going down the crack, you know what I'm talking about. Making TikToks, and sure, if that's fine for you, that's fine for you, but that's not fine for me. And when I look around, it actually shocks me. So that is one of the reasons why I think China is great for an upbringing like that, because kids here are just so innocent and so playful for so long.
Yeah, I think Ursula's right. You know, there's just a big difference between the pop culture in the West, in England and America in particular, and China. I mean, I've been watching this kind of thing evolve over the decades. And in the West, it's just become increasingly sexualized. And in China, they just have a lid on it, man. You know, there's no like WAP or twerking in China, right? So the kids, they don't get exposed to this kind of stuff, which is more, in my eyes, more adult content. They're kept more focused on school age, age-appropriate things. And then on top of that, in the West, you have so much pressure from social media that really eats away at a kid's innocence and forces them to grow up quicker and to be focused on more superficial things. Whereas in China, you know, like it or not, they have a real handle on these kind of social media platforms, and they don't allow, or they at least try very hard to not let their kids and their youth get under the grip of this kind of social media craze. And I think these kind of things together, yeah, they just elongate the innocence and make childhood stretch longer, which I think is really cool.
Didi, I have a question for you.
Yeah?
What do you like about growing up in China?
Well, growing up in China is that all the people are pretty friendly and it's very safe here. And everything is a lot cheaper. For example, this dog costs 900 kwai. In England, it probably costs like 2,000 pounds. There's a lot of food stores and there's a lot of noodles and rice, and that's kind of my favorite dish. There's also a lot of soup, and it's also really safe, so winner, winner.
Okay guys, reason number 2 for why we choose to raise our children here in China is the environment. Now, I don't mean the biological environment like air quality and things like that. I mean the urban environment in which we live. Chinese cities are very clean, everything functions, they're very convenient, and they have all of the facilities you would need. Now, of course, European cities and American cities have these kind of things too, but the way things are maintained here, it really creates an atmosphere of safety. It's very conducive to raising a family, in my opinion. I'll give you an example of where that kind of thing is not so cool, was when we went to Berlin a couple of years ago. And now I love Berlin, I'm not knocking Berlin, it's a great city. We have a lot of fun when we go there, but Ursula and I went there without the children. And when we arrived, we went to the nearest, I think it was the nearest metro stop or bus station, something like that, to get the bus into town. And it was full of graffiti and litter, and it was kind of dark and dingy. It did not feel safe. It was not a good environment. And that's a good example of where you have a public facility, a public service area that's been just left to become like a decaying edifice of what it should be. And I remember thinking, man, you know, if you compare the metro stations and the bus stations there to the ones you have in China, there's such a big difference. And another example from Berlin is Ursula and I were walking through a park, and we were followed by 3 or 4 shady looking characters, and they were closing in on us. This is a park where there's children playing and some swings and slides and stuff like that. And these guys were being quite aggressive, and we got out of the park, and I remember thinking, man, if I was a father here bringing up my children in this environment with dealers around, I would not be happy. And once again, it really made me appreciate China's urban environment, which is top-notch.
And at number 1 is language, of course. Everybody knows that babies and toddlers can learn a language real quick, real fast, and real easy. And since I gave birth here in China, we were already in that position where our kids could learn Chinese, Dutch, and English like a sponge. So that's the main reason why we decided to stay so long, because I got my eye on the future. These kids are gonna be trilingual, and in the future it's gonna be a massive advantage for them if they can read, speak, and write Chinese and English. Imagine in the future when Freddie or Didi want to apply for a job and there's like, what, 80 other applicants going for the same position, and they have that special skill at the top of their resume. That job's gonna be in the pocket, yes or no? So this is one of the things that keeps us here in China, helps them study hard and have a bright future. And sure, I'm not saying it is easy to learn the Chinese language. I mean, they have thousands of characters. Freddie and Didi need to learn how to read and write thousands of characters. It's not like the alphabet with just 26 letters. It takes a lot of dedication, it takes a lot of study, it takes a lot of sacrifice, but I think in the end, it's gonna be worth it. Believe it or not, everything, almost everything, is made here in China. So knowing the Chinese language, knowing the English language, understanding the Chinese culture and understanding the Western culture, oh man, your future's gonna be bright. Okay, so that was it. That was our top 5 reasons why we choose to raise our kids here in China.
If you like the video, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, share with friends, whatever you can do to help us. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
See ya, bye-bye.